Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, and also Happy New Year! I am filming this on the 1st of January, and that means it is time to talk about all of the best books that I read in 2024. I always wait until January to start talking about my wrap-ups for the end of the year, because I am reading right up until midnight on the 31st of December, and usually I finish at least one book on the last day of the year or a couple of books around the last couple of days. But it is officially the 1st of January as I'm filming this, and you'll probably see this video later today as well, so Happy New Year if you are watching this on the 1st of January. And the absolute first video I wanted to film for my end of the year kind of reading wrap-ups is going to be the best books that I read in 2024. I thought we should start off really positive, and I'm just going to tell you all of the absolute best books that I read. A little bit of statistics for you. I read, in the end, exactly 200 books in the year of 2024, which feels insane. I've never read that many books before in my life. Last year I read around 180, so I thought maybe I could do it, and I kind of pushed myself in the last couple of months of the year to reach the goal of 200 to see if I could do it. And now I know I can do it, I'm thinking it was a little bit insane and I might not try for that again next year. But I'm going to do a whole video on my reading goals and all things like that, and looking back at my statistics for reading for the past year. So that will all be in that video. But these are the best of the best out of all 200 books that I read in 2024. And I actually didn't have a top 10. I didn't want to force my list into a top 10. So I've got a top 7, and then I've got a few honourable mentions as well that didn't quite make it into my top 7. But just know, all of the books on this list I absolutely adore with all of my heart. They are all new to me this year, and none of them are rereads, because I did do a couple of rereads that were old favourites, so they're not included in the list. There's lots of 5-star books for me. I've rated about 20 books, I think, 5 stars, but these 7 are not only 5 stars, they would be 6 stars. They'd be the best of the best. So let's just jump in with the list. The first one that I'm going to talk about is one that I read relatively recently. It's the newest addition to this list, and it is The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. I have absolutely loved diving more into Ursula K. Le Guin's writing this year, and it's been so much fun and so rewarding. I read The Left Hand of Darkness last year, I believe, and then this year I read The Dispossessed, and I loved it even more. The Left Hand of Darkness was a 5-star read for me, but The Dispossessed, something about it just was even more perfect for me, I think, because of the characters and how this was written. So this is a sci-fi book, and it's like a sci-fi like nothing else I've ever read, though. There's something about her writing that just absolutely works for me. And I was reading this at a time where I was reading loads of books that just ended up being 3-star reads for me, and I was just getting so frustrated. And then I picked up this book, and you know that feeling when you're immediately just feel relaxed when you're in the world of a book, where you're oh, I'm going to be taken care of now. This author is going to give me an amazing book no matter what I do. I just relaxed when I started reading this, even though this book is not a relaxing read. So don't get me wrong, it's complicated, it's difficult, it'll make you think, but it is so well worth it. This book is all about 2 planets that live very close to each other. It's actually a planet and a moon, and they originated from the same people. They were the same society, but many years ago, one small group of people left the planet and went to live on the moon, and they started their own society there. And then in the generations that have followed, they have diverged in huge ways in the way that they live, and the people on the moon don't want anything to do with anybody else. But one man who lives on the moon is trying to develop a new theory of physics, a universal theory of time, and the people from his own community just aren't the right audience for his work, and he finds himself wanting to go to the planet, and he finds that this planet is a place of tolerance and ultimate freedom, but underneath it all there is perhaps something not as amazing as it seems with this planet. I absolutely love this book. There is so much in this to explore, as our main character is grappling with questions of humanity and how how we should be living. And it's got that classic, or what I'm thinking now is that classic Ursula K. Le Guin, like kind of person who is a fish out of water and trying to survive in a different society and culture and politics, kind of learning on their feet that they are incredibly naive about some certain ways of the world. I just absolutely love this. It's so incredible. I'm going to read all of Ursula K. Le Guin's writing now. The next one I'm going to read is going to be The Lathe of Heaven. So if you've read that, then let me know what you think. But that is the first book on my best books of 2024. Next up, we're going to talk about a book that I read all the way back in January, I believe. And this is a big old book that I ended up reading in about 3 days. And that book is The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. And I also had a book on my list for 2023, my best books of 2023 by Barbara Kingsolver, which was Demon Copperhead. And so it only felt right that also she's on this list again. This book, on the surface, shouldn't be for me, but I just absolutely loved it, and I just think it's so well written and well done. But why I say it's kind of not for me on its surface is because this is a historical fiction. It's following a family. It's kind of a multi-generational. You're following a family through a long period of time. The setup is kind of something I've read before, but none of that matters because just the way that this book is done is the best way, because this is the blueprint of historical fiction, family, generational stories. So this book is about the wife and the 4 daughters of a man called Nathan, who is a evangelical Baptist, and he is determined to go on a mission to the Belgian Congo, and this is set in the 1960s, or 1959 is when it begins. He is on a personal mission to bring the word of God and Christianity to the people of the Belgian Congo, and he brings along his family, and you don't actually ever get perspective from Nathan himself. You hear just from his wife and the 4 daughters, and from there you're just following their life as they are trying to survive, because everything is not as they thought it would be when they get there. Whether that's the religion that they are trying to instill in these people, or whether it's the gardens that they're trying to grow and the community that they're trying to become a part of. This book is one of my best books of the year because of the character work, though. Each character in this was so incredibly distinct and also worked so well. Like, I felt like every single person in this book was so real, so balanced in terms of like their flaws and their goals and their motivations, and everything just felt so rich and so deep. And so the plot itself is not the main focus, or at least it wasn't for me. It was just living with these characters and seeing how they grow and evolve over time as well, and kind of harden because of the environment that they're in. I just absolutely loved this. If you like historical fiction, if you like these kinds of stories, absolutely read it. Even if you don't, if you're a bit like me, a little bit more hesitant sometimes with those stories, still just absolutely read it because it is so good. And I think this one also gets kind of a bad rap. Not a bad rap, but it's called kind of a book club book. I actually read it with my book club, and I think people can call books book club books in a little bit of a disparaging way. This one, like, this is the ultimate book club book as well. Just absolutely read it. It's so good. Okay, so book number 3. These top 3 aren't really ordered, but they are the top 3, if you get what I mean. And then I have like the other ones for the top 7 that are also kind of in a separate bucket but not ordered within themselves, if that makes sense. So the third book that I want to talk about, I also read this book with my friend book club actually as well. So it's been an incredible year for my friend book club, and that book is Stillborn by Guadelupe Nettel. I'm not sure how I'm saying that author's name. I don't think I've ever heard it pronounced. This is one of those books that, to me, when I picked it up and started reading it, I was like, oh, this was written for me specifically in this period of my life right now. I would say, before I even go into this, definitely check on trigger warnings and content warnings if there is anything that you're sensitive to around pregnancy, childbirth, raising a family, that kind of thing. There is a lot of topics that I'd explored in this book that might be triggering for some people. But for me, it felt like someone was finally writing down everything that I was thinking. Because basically, in this book, someone is deciding whether or not to have children. Or actually, they're not really. It's kind of about 2 friends, and both of them have decided that they're not going to have children. One of the women, Laura, decides to get sterilised, but then her friend Alina becomes really drawn to the idea of becoming a mother and then starts trying to have a baby. So the book is about their friendship, and that's another reason I love this so much, is because it has such a focus on female friendship and community. But a lot of what is discussed here is just this decision about whether or not to have a baby and what your life could look like either way. And I read this book so incredibly quickly. I want to reread it actually again because I feel like it's already one of my favorites, but I need to like reread it on a regular basis. The biggest way I can describe how I felt about reading this book is like relief. I felt like so relieved that this was just writing down everything that I had been personally grappling with. If you're in a similar position to me, I just feel like this is essential reading, and I just absolutely loved this book. But it is sad, so keep that in mind. It did make me bawl. So those are the top 3. These are my 3 favourite books of 2024, without a doubt. Now we're going to go on to my other favourite books, but they're not really ordered. But the first one I want to talk about is actually a non-fiction, and this one absolutely took me by surprise this year. Completely took me by surprise. And that book is The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. I have had this on my list to read for probably a decade. I finally read it this year, and oh my god, I loved it. This was so beautiful. Everything you've heard about this book is true. And I thought I knew what it was about. I thought I knew what this was going to be. And so I just put off reading it for so long. But I didn't know. I actually didn't know what it was really about. Because this is truly the diary of a young girl. This is a young, intelligent, stubborn, curious girl who is just trying to make her place in the world and discover who she is, all while living with her family in an attic, hiding from the Nazis. There is so much to love within this book. The way that you can see the writing style changing and evolving as she gets older, the ways in which like her relationships to the people around her change as she becomes more empathetic as she grows and matures. I just absolutely loved this book. It was another one that obviously made me absolutely bawl. I was crying so much reading this book, but it is so beautiful and absolutely essential reading. Like, this is one of those books that I just like wish I could go back and tell myself, like, everyone tells you to read this and you just think you already know what it's about or what it's like, but you actually don't. Like, just go and actually read it. It's so beautiful and will be one of my favourite books, I think, for all time. So that is the only non-fiction that made it onto my favourites list. Now let's change paces a little bit and talk a little bit about some fantasy books, because obviously that is one of my primary genres that I read, and I have not yet even mentioned a fantasy book on this list. So, book number 5 that I want to talk about is Blood Over Bright Haven. I have 2 copies of this book because I love it that much. This is the advanced reader copy that I got early, and then this is the final hardcover. And I'm not even a hardcover girl, but I love this book so much, and I also really love this hardcover. So Blood Over Bright Haven is by M.L. Wang, who also wrote The Sword of Kaigan, which I also read and I also loved. I would actually say this one is better. If you've read Sword of Kaigan and you loved it, pick this one up because you're going to love it. It is breakneck, like it starts and you are immediately in the story and caring about the characters already, which for me just feels insane, because she's also building this incredibly intricate world, this magic system, this universe in which we have to care. Also, if dark academia is your thing, this one does have touches of dark academia as well. I would not say it's a fully like dark academia novel, but our main character in this is working incredibly hard to try and be accepted within this prestigious academy for wizards, and no woman has ever been accepted before. And just when she finally manages to pass the qualifying exam and is accepted into this very elite society, she realizes that all of her colleagues are actually not going to let her get any of the important work that she wants to do done. She's assigned a janitor as a lab assistant, and there we meet our second main character, who is part of a marginalized community within this world, and then they start to work together to uncover kind of some secret conspiracies and corrupt powers at the heart of the society in which they live. This book is just like unapologetically so much fun. It's so fast-paced. It's got really interesting characters with, I think, really exciting flaws at their center. So you can almost see the way that the story is going to go by the end of it. It doesn't pull any punches at all. Just like every single aspect of it is really incredible, and it builds up to make an absolutely incredible book. The characters are great, the world building is great, the plotting and like the way it's written are also great. Everything's amazing. Read this book. This is like one of my favourite fantasy books of the year, 100%. So that is Blood Over Bright Haven. Next up, we have a young adult fantasy that has actually made it onto my best books of the year list. And I read most of this series last year, but I read this book, the final one, this year, and I've just absolutely loved it so much, so I had to have a spot for it on this list. And that book is The Golden Enclaves by Naomi Novik, which is the final book in the, what's it actually called, the Scholomance series. I absolutely love this series, one of my all-time favourites. Like, this is how young adult fantasy should be written. So incredible. I talked a lot about this series actually in my wrap up for 2023 because that's when I read the first two books. So I won't talk specifically about this book because obviously it's the third book in a series. It's going to be hugely spoilery. So this series is following Elle, who attends a highly dangerous magical school called the Scholomance. But basically you have to attend the Scholomance to even have a hope of surviving. But they are forced to go to this very dangerous school because magical children in this world are hugely in danger by being devoured by like the dark creatures of this world. They're forced to go to this school, but the school is not like any other school. There's no teachers, and every day you're at risk of being killed either by all of the evil creatures that are preying on these magical children, or by your own folly because there's no teachers and no instruction, or by other people at the school even. I just loved the world in which this was created, and I also just loved our main character Elle because she is so moody and so grumpy and so like unapologetic. She is someone who's just absolutely so sure that no one wants to be friends with her because she doesn't want to be friends with anybody else and she's fine just all on her own. But then when she realizes that people actually might want to be friends with her, she just becomes the most like loyal best friend in the world. It's just adorable. One word of warning I would say is the world building in this is like quite heavy and the exposition is quite intense a lot of the time. You are kind of getting lectures from the main character about how the world works. I personally loved it because I loved the way that the world worked. So every time you got more information about it, I was just like eating it up. If that is not your preferred way of reading, which I do understand, this might not be the series for you, but it was definitely the series for me. So this one was a 5 out of 5. I loved the ending and how everything wrapped up in this story. Just absolutely loved it. Would definitely reread and highly recommend this series. Okay, and then the final book on my like top 7 books before I go into like some honourable mentions is Nona the Ninth, another book that I have been talking about for years. I absolutely love this series, and this is the third and most recent book in the Locked Tomb trilogy. I love this whole series. I've loved every single book. Every single book that I read in the series, I say, this is my new favourite one. I love it so much. And this one is no different. These books are incredibly complicated and they do it on purpose. That is something that you have to know going in. You will be confused, and if you don't like feeling confused, you won't like these books. If you're okay with sitting it with a bit of confusion and kind of like trying to figure stuff out and then just like kind of having faith that it'll make sense in the end, then you can enjoy these books. They are set in a world where there is 9 different planets, and the main magic system in this world is necromancy, and each different planet has a kind of different affinity with necromancy magic. And you're following a few different characters, but mainly Gideon from the 9th house. The 9th house is kind of crumbling. It's in a lot of danger of losing all of its power, and so Gideon and the heir of the 9th house are kind of working together, even though they absolutely hate each other, to try and restore power to the 9th house. There is so much in here. There is lesbian necromancers in space, as the tagline says, but there is also so many jokes, and there's like very memeable humor. So if you don't like that type of humor either, you won't like it, because there is so many random, like, just genuinely make me laugh out loud, like burst out laughing because of something that is referencing about like Tumblr back in 2014 that you just like actually makes me cry laughing at it being included in this book in quite usually like a quite a serious way, like that will actually hit you emotionally as well. I love these books so much. They're so fun. If you like sci-fi, absolutely pick these up. So much fun. That is Nona the Ninth, and they are the 7 best books I read in 2024. Let's move on quickly. I'm just going to briefly mention a few honourable mentions, and these didn't make it to the top for a few different reasons, but honestly mainly because I listen to them as audiobooks, and sometimes with an audiobook I really end up loving the book, and then I'm not sure if I like it more because of an audiobook. So I feel like I sometimes want to reread stuff as a physical book. I don't know why. This is like such a weird thing. Maybe I need to like explore that. But like I read a lot of books. I have a tendency when I listen to an audiobook to rate it higher. So then when I do get a 5 out of 5 on an audio, I'm like, oh, would this actually be a 4? But I don't think it would. I think these would be 5 out of 5s. But anyway, these are my honourable mentions for best books of 2024. Firstly, we have one that could be a new favourite. I'm going to reread it and see. That book is Private Rites by Julia Armfield. I loved this book and I liked it even more than her previous book that was Our Wives Under the Sea. This book still has all of that creepy atmosphere and a lot of the water imagery as well, because in this world, constant rainfall has meant that most of the world is flooded or like at risk of being flooded. And you're following 3 sisters and they have a famous architect for a father who has come up with many different ideas in which to build houses to raise them above like the water line, the flood line of this world. But when their father dies, all 3 sisters who have become estranged in their life come back together. I loved this book because it's so creepy, it's so atmospheric, it's very surprising, and also just these sisterly relationships are so complicated. I think they're incredibly realistic and it is an incredibly written book. So this could be a new favourite, but I need to reread it. Next up, we have another sci-fi, and that is The Three-Body Problem. This one took me completely by surprise, and honestly, when I finished it, I thought maybe it's like a 4-star read. But then the longer and longer and longer I've thought about this book, I've just pushed it up and up and up, because it is one that's just burrowed itself into my brain and I constantly think about it, and I think about how much this book has changed the landscape also of sci-fi, because once I've read it and then I can just see kind of all the influences that it's had on the genre. This book is an alien first contact story, but it is set during the Chinese Cultural Revolution. It really digs deep into the questions of humanity, and I loved the way that it took like a small seed of an idea and like pushed it further and further and further to see how far that one idea can run, and just like the way that it evolved. I just thought that this book was incredible. It's very long though, and it does have boring aspects to it, but I do really, really love this book, so I just wanted to do it in honourable mentions, even though it didn't quite make it into my top 7. Next up, we have a book that I've only just finished very recently, haven't even talked about it yet because I haven't done my December wrap up, but that book is Strange the Dreamer. I read this recently. I thought I was going to love it, and I absolutely did love it. This was such a wonderful dream-like story. Another book that I just think was written so beautifully, and the world in which it was written is so unique. But basically you're starting off with Strange, who is working in a library but has dreams of one day travelling to the lost and forgotten city of Wheat. And he has become an expert on this place that nobody else really remembers. But then when a convoy arrives from this city itself asking for people to come and help the city, he is the first to volunteer. When he gets there, not everything is as wonderful as he imagined, and he has to try and use all of his power that he can to try and save this city. I absolutely love this one. Go in, I think, kind of blind. It's like very beautiful story to discover. I love the writing. It can be a little bit long in times, and have preference for writing rather than moving the plot on, but a lot happens in this book still. It really does pack a punch. My final honourable mention is a book that I read this year, and I vlogged the whole process of me reading it, so if you want to watch that, that is on my channel somewhere. Maybe I'll tag it somewhere. But it didn't quite make it to my favourites, but I have to talk about it, and that is War and Peace. I read this year. I was so surprised in the end that I did give it 5 stars, because at portions through this book I was like, oh my god, I can't believe I'm still reading this. But in the end, it did actually really stick with me. And when I finally got to the end of this book, not that it all clicked into place, because obviously I was enjoying lots of aspects of this book, but kind of it just like, it burrowed itself in. And I just have to talk about it, because this is not going to be one of my favourite books and not something I would recommend to everybody to read either. But I have to talk about it because my god, was this a journey this year, and it is a 5-star read for me. But if you wanted have my full thoughts and experience of reading this book, you can go and watch the vlog in which I spend weeks of my life tackling that book. So that is all of the books that I wanted to talk about today. They are the 7 best books that I read in 2024 and a few honourable mentions as well. Please let me know if you've read any of these books or if you want to read them now. And please also give me your top books that you read in 2024. Maybe a top 3 or do a full top 7 as well like I did. I'd be so interested. I love reading all the comments and seeing what your favourite books are as well. Stay tuned for my worst books of the year video. I didn't have any issue coming up with 10 for that one, so that'll be a fun ranting video that's coming up very soon. And also I'm going to be doing a book awards video as well, so I'm going to be talking about my best romance book that didn't kind of come up here, my favourite characters, all of these kind of things in a book awards video as well. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you're subscribed. Please leave me a comment below saying whatever you want. Go and watch all of my other videos and I will see you again soon. Bye!